Jerry collapsed here at ringside.
He was stretchered to the back to the locker room area. They are performing CPR.
As celebrated as professional wrestling genuinely is, its history carries moments the industry would sooner erase. While the results are decided in advance, the physical toll is absolutely real, and when things go wrong, there is no safety net waiting to catch anyone. Over the decades, that reality has produced tragedies, moments when wrestlers stepped through the ropes to entertain and never came back out alive. Iron Mike DiBiase. We start with one of the earliest documented in-ring fatalities on record. If that surname rings a bell, cause Mike DiBiase was the stepfather of the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, widely regarded as one of the greatest heels in WWE history. Long before Ted was flashing cash and trying to buy the WWE Championship on television, his stepfather was helping lay the foundation for what professional wrestling would eventually become. Iron Mike had a reputation for maintaining extraordinary physical condition. Perhaps the clearest illustration of that came when he went up against Dory Funk Sr. in a Texas death match that reportedly stretched an astonishing 4 hours and 10 minutes. Tragically, DiBiase's career and life were cut short on July 2, 1969, in Leach, Texas. During a match against Man Mountain Mike, Iron Mike clutched his chest and collapsed mid-lockup. Initially, no one fully grasped the gravity of the situation. Professional wrestling in that era had virtually no medical infrastructure in place, and sudden collapses were frequently mistaken for fatigue or simply part of the show. According to the Pro Wrestling Historical Society, Harley Race was the first person at ringside to recognize that something was seriously wrong. He immediately began administering CPR and rode alongside DiBiase to a nearby hospital. Those efforts, Iron Mike DiBiase was pronounced dead shortly after arriving. The cause was a heart attack. He was only 45 years old. An autopsy later uncovered severe coronary artery disease caused by cholesterol buildup, with years of relentless physical strain silently deteriorating his arteries without any visible warning, a finding that stunned everyone who had believed him to be in peak physical shape. In 1969, wrestlers had no wellness programs. There were no cardiac screenings, no long-term health evaluations. They simply performed until their bodies gave out beneath them. For Ted DiBiase, losing his stepfather was something that reshaped his life and followed him for years. Reflecting on that profound influence, the $1 Million Man once said, "He had a storied career and he was a good dad. One of the things he told me when I was very young was, don't follow the crowd. It takes no courage to do that. Be a leader, not a follower. Be the head, tail. If you work real hard, you can be anything you want, if you're willing to pay the price and make the sacrifices." He never once bragged about that stuff. I always heard stories from other people about his college career and other achievements. Owen Hart. May 23, 1999 will endure forever as one of the darkest evenings in WWE history. That night, nearly 18,000 wrestling fans filled Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri for the Over the Edge pay-per-view, an event designed to sustain the blazing momentum of the Attitude Era. Among the matches advertised that evening, Owen Hart, performing under the Blue Blazer persona, was scheduled to face The Godfather for the Intercontinental Championship, a contest he was slated to win. The youngest son of Stu and Helen Hart had competed across the globe, but became most celebrated for his 9-year run in the WWE, where he wrestled both alongside and against his brother Bret Hart. Behind the curtain, Owen was known as a light-hearted prankster who could reliably make the entire locker room laugh. But on this particular night, he was visibly on edge. To add theatrical flair to his entrance, Owen was scheduled to descend from the rafters using a harness equipped with a quick-release mechanism. Though he had completed a practice run successfully earlier that afternoon, Owen remained uneasy about the stunt and reportedly voiced his discomfort with the setup beforehand. At approximately 7:55 p.m., as Owen waited for his cue, everything went catastrophically wrong. The quick-release mechanism disengaged too early, sending him plummeting from the rafters in a fall that lasted mere seconds, leaving him absolutely no time to respond. Owen dropped roughly 78 feet, landing chest first across the top rope before tumbling into the ring. The impact caused devastating internal injuries, including the severing of his aorta. Television viewers at home were spared the immediate horror as a pre-taped vignette vignette happened to be airing at that precise moment. Those seated inside the arena, however, saw everything. One fan later recalled believing at first that a dummy had dropped from above, only to realize in dawning horror that it was Owen Hart when he tried to rise before collapsing once more. Ringside personnel, referees, and paramedics immediately converged on Owen's side. He was placed on a stretcher, loaded into an ambulance, and transported to Truman Medical Center. Despite every effort to revive him, Owen Hart was pronounced dead at 8:25 p.m., 33 minutes after the fall. To say the WWE was shaken to its foundation would be a profound understatement, as fellow wrestlers and fans alike struggled to comprehend what had just taken place. At 9:15 p.m., Jim Ross informed the television audience that Owen Hart had died from his injuries at the age of 34. The live crowd inside Kemper Arena, however, was never informed of Owen's passing. What came next remains one of the most disputed decisions in WWE history. Vince McMahon chose to press forward with the pay-per-view. The main event between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker proceeded as scheduled, with The Undertaker claiming the WWE Championship, though for many, the victory felt entirely hollow. Immediately following the event, WWE convened a press conference. Addressing the assembled media, Vince McMahon said, "We in the World Wrestling Federation are saddened by the tragic accident that occurred here tonight. We send our condolences and sympathy to Owen Hart's family, his wife, Martha, and their two very young children. We don't have any answer as to why this happened. There is an ongoing investigation." In November 2000, WWE settled a wrongful death lawsuit with Martha Hart for a reported $18 million, though that legal resolution did little to silence the criticism directed at the company over how it handled everything. Owen's wife Martha was openly vocal in her condemnation of WWE's decision that night, stating that the arena should have been immediately treated as a crime scene. Some suggested that Owen's death was not accidental, raising the possibility of foul play. At the time, even Bret Hart appeared to entertain such thoughts. Speaking in the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary, Bret revealed his fear that something sinister may have befallen his brother as a result of his own turbulent relationship with the company. "It really was very hard for me to take at that time because I kept thinking that maybe it was. Maybe they murdered him to get back at me." It was ultimately hearing directly from a Kansas City police officer that finally allowed Bret to accept that his brother's death had been nothing more than a horrific accident. Though his life and career were stolen far too soon by a senseless tragedy, the King of Hearts' legacy will forever stand as one of the greatest technical wrestlers the sport has ever produced. Brian Ong. But not every wrestling tragedy plays out on a worldwide stage. Some unfold far from the spotlight, inside quiet training gyms where dreams are constructed, and in certain cases, tragically shattered. That brings us to a wrestling school. Brian Ong was a 27-year-old aspiring wrestler from Berkeley, California. During the day, he worked as a file clerk. At night, he pursued his dream of breaking into professional wrestling. He idolized high-flying performers like Sabu and had enrolled in All Pro Wrestling's boot camp in Hayward, California, paying nearly $6,000 for the chance to train under seasoned professionals. What Ong's trainers did not know was that he carried a history of concussions stemming from his karate background. Those injuries were never disclosed, as Ong reportedly feared that revealing them would extinguish his wrestling ambitions entirely. On May 28, 2001, Ong was training at the APW boot camp alongside Dalip Singh Rana, still years removed from becoming WWE's Great Khali. At the time, Singh stood over 7 feet tall and weighed more than 400 pounds, but carried less than 6 months of wrestling experience himself. They were drilling the spinebuster, a move common across wrestling playbooks. But something went horribly wrong. Brian grabbed Khali's shirt during the move, causing him to land awkwardly. Tailbone struck first, then his head snapped back violently into the mat. Sadly, after the move, Brian never got up. He was rushed to the hospital, but hours later, he passed away. Subsequent investigations revealed that Ong had already sustained a prior concussion and should never have been medically cleared to train, let alone absorb bumps from a trainee of Singh's size and limited experience. Ong's family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against All Pro Wrestling, citing insufficient training oversight and inadequate safety protocols. In 2005, the family prevailed in court and was awarded over $1 million in damages. For the Great Khali, the tragedy cut deeply. By all accounts, he was devastated by Ong's death and carried significant guilt, even though the courts ultimately assigned responsibility to the training facility rather than to Khali personally. personally. Years afterward, 2015 interview with the Indian Express, he reflected on that day, saying, "I was shaken up. It felt horrible, but what could I have done? I wasn't going to stop wrestling." Brian Ong's death remains one of the most sobering reminders that wrestling's dangers don't begin under bright stadium lights. They begin long before, in the spaces where dreams are supposed to be safely nurtured. Ox Baker was among professional wrestling's most notorious on-screen villains, a figure whose very presence was engineered to disturb audiences. Standing 6'5" and weighing over 340 pounds, Baker didn't merely look dangerous, he was packaged as something barely human. Promoters pushed him to shave his head, cultivate his pointed eyebrows, and maintain his thick black handlebar mustache, crafting a look that fans frequently likened to Satan himself. To many people, Ox Baker wasn't just a wrestler. He resembled a horror movie creature that had somehow stepped off the screen. That persona was reinforced by his chilling catchphrase, "I love to hurt people," a line so notorious it later served as the title of a 1985 wrestling mockumentary. At the heart of Baker's legend was his signature move, the Heart Punch, also known as the Hurt Punch, a strike marketed as being so precisely delivered that it could literally stop a man's heart cold. But fiction and reality soon began bleeding into each other. In 1971, following a tag team match in Nebraska, Baker's opponent, Alberto Torres, died 3 days later. Official medical reports attributed the death to heart disease and a ruptured pancreas, likely connected to a pre-existing, untreated appendix condition. Those findings, promoters leaned hard into the story that Baker's Heart Punch had been responsible for Torres's death, deepening his standing as wrestling's most lethal performer. Then in 1972, tragedy struck once more. Ray Gunkel, a respected wrestler and influential promoter throughout Georgia, faced Baker in a match he ultimately won. But later that same night, Gunkel collapsed and died in the locker room. An autopsy identified severe arteriosclerosis, though it also noted a hematoma from a punch that may have contributed to a fatal blood clot. Once again, Baker's name became synonymous with death. Privately, these events devastated Ox Baker. Those close to him described a man profoundly shaken and consumed by guilt. Professional wrestling in that period operated under strict kayfabe. There was no room for public grief, no acknowledgement of trauma, and no separation between the character and the human being wearing it. Baker was forced to carry the burden of those deaths while continuing to play the villain the industry required of him. And the great irony is this: behind the terrifying exterior was a man widely regarded as genuinely gentle. Fellow wrestlers regularly described Ox Baker as a teddy bear, kind, soft-spoken, and generous in sharing his knowledge. In his later years, he even opened a wrestling school, helping shape future generations, including a young man who would one day become The Undertaker. Jerry Lawler is not counted among wrestlers who perished in the ring, but on September 10th, 2012, he came frightfully close to joining that grim list. During a live episode of Monday Night Raw from Montreal, a match between Team Hell No and the Primetime Players was in progress when fans in the front rows began noticing something alarming near the announcer's table. While calling the action, Cole recalled hearing Lawler making unusual sounds through his headset. Initially, Cole assumed Lawler was joking, consistent with the way he used to mock dull wrestlers or unexciting matches. Then I looked over and Jerry was laying down on the table, Cole recounted. One moment, Lawler was doing what he had spent decades doing, calling the action, delivering quips, and being the familiar voice millions of fans associated with WWE programming. The next, he slumped forward and went completely unresponsive. Cole immediately cut his commentary microphone and shouted for a doctor as fans throughout the arena began chanting for Lawler. According to multiple reports, Lawler was quickly moved to the backstage area, where doctors worked urgently to revive him. Some backstage accounts later indicated that Lawler was clinically dead for as long as 30 minutes before being brought back. Out of respect for his colleague, Cole announced that he could not continue commentating for the rest of the broadcast. Cardiac arrests can stem from many causes, but in Lawler's situation, several contributing factors were identified. He was 62 years old at the time, and his body had absorbed decades of punishment from professional wrestling. Beyond that, Lawler had pulled double duty that night. Earlier in the show, he had competed in a tag team match alongside Randy Orton against CM Punk and Dolph Ziggler. In several shoot interviews, Lawler later argued that the physical demands of that match contributed directly to his cardiac arrest. He stated plainly, "Dolph Ziggler is the guy that caused me to have a cardiac arrest. He gave me 10 elbows to my chest, and that trauma caused my heart to stop." Remarkably, Lawler returned to WWE commentary by November 2012, just 2 months afterward. A man who had technically died on live television was was sitting back at the desk before the calendar year had ended. Ultimately, his survival came down to one decisive factor. Trained medical professionals were already on hand and capable of acting without delay. Perro Aguayo Jr. In 2015, professional wrestling was once again forced to stare directly at its own dangers through the death of Perro Aguayo Jr. The son of Mexican wrestling legend Perro Aguayo, Aguayo Jr. was surrounded by the business from the earliest age. He made his professional debut at just 15 years old in 1995, frequently competing alongside his father. Through the years, he assembled an impressive resume entirely his own. Spent 8 years in ADA before moving to rival promotion CMLL, where he wrestled until 2008. Aguayo Jr. eventually returned to ADA, where he would spend the final 7 years of his career. His ability was hard to overlook. He won the Wrestling Observer Rookie of the Year award and was ranked as high as 8th in the 2007 Pro Wrestling Illustrated 500, second among Mexican wrestlers only to one other that year. Tragically, on March 21, 2015, Perro Aguayo Jr.'s career and life reached a devastating and permanent end. The beloved luchador was competing in a tag team match in Tijuana, Mexico, pairing with Manic against Rey Mysterio Jr. and Extreme Tiger. What had started as a routine contest turned deadly when Mysterio connected with a flying kick to Aguayo Jr. The impact sent Aguayo Jr. crashing into the ropes, where he slumped down and remained hunched in a kneeling position, tangled against the middle rope. Initially, the moment was not read as an emergency. The match continued for nearly 2 minutes while referees and wrestlers assumed Aguayo Jr. was selling the impact. Only when it became undeniable that he was fully unresponsive did officials halt the contest. Medical personnel rushed to his side, but it was already too late. Aguayo Jr. had sustained catastrophic injuries. His cervical vertebrae had snapped upon contact with the ropes, triggering a cervical stroke that produced cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. He was just 35 years old. The incident sent shockwaves cascading through the wrestling world. Rey Mysterio Jr., visibly destroyed, was left gutted by the loss of his friend and colleague, despite having executed that same maneuver countless times throughout his career. Aguayo Jr.'s family made it clear they carried no resentment toward Mysterio, later asking him to serve as one of Aguayo Jr.'s pallbearers, a powerful statement that the tragedy was a horrific accident, not an act of negligence or malice. Luther Lindsay. Luther Lindsay was among the most significant African-American trailblazers in the entire history of professional wrestling. During an era when black wrestlers were routinely held back, denied main event positions, and locked out of championship pursuits, Lindsay crossed barriers that many considered uncrossable. He became the first African-American wrestler to ever challenge for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, competing for the industry's most prestigious title during a period defined entirely by racial discrimination. Nobody could have anticipated how abruptly his life would end. On February 21, 1972, Luther Lindsay was competing in what was supposed to be a standard house show, facing local wrestler Bobby Paul at the Park Center in Charlotte. Lindsay pinned his opponent roughly 10 minutes into the match after landing a diving belly flop. The match was finished. Lindsay had won, except he never rose from the canvas. At first, no one gave it a second thought. Wrestlers fake exhaustion constantly, but seconds stretched on, then more followed. Lindsay never moved. Somewhere in the instant between launching into that splash and landing, his heart stopped completely. Luther Lindsay had suffered a fatal heart attack right there in the ring. He was carried backstage, where he was later pronounced dead. He was 46 years old. There had been no known health problems and no warning signs whatsoever. Lindsay's death occurred during a time when medical oversight inside professional wrestling was almost non-existent. Routine health screenings were uncommon, and performer safety was frequently deprioritized, particularly for black wrestlers competing during an era shaped by racial barriers and drastically limited protections. Despite all of those obstacles, Luther Lindsay performed at an elite level and made history while doing it. Decades later, in 2017, WWE posthumously inducted Luther Lindsay into the Hall of Fame, formally acknowledging everything he contributed to the industry. Dog Spot. Much like Luther Lindsay, Moondog Spot's death remains one of the more unsettling chapters in wrestling history, both for how it unfolded and where it took place. On November 29, 2003, Spot was booked for a Memphis Championship Wrestling event held in honor of Jerry Lawler's birthday. During the bout, he participated in a routine exchange and went down after absorbing a standard clothesline. It became apparent almost immediately that Spot had suffered a heart attack in the ring. He was rushed for medical attention, but was pronounced dead rehab before reaching the hospital. He was 51 years old. To many fans, Moondog Spot represented a very specific chapter of professional wrestling. Part of the Moondogs, he cultivated a reputation built on chaos, raw physicality, and pure unpredictability. The gimmick was loud and deliberately exaggerated, but it resonated. The team found genuine success in the early 1980s, including a reign as WWF Tag Team Champions, at a time when tag wrestling genuinely mattered. His career stretched well beyond the national platform. In Memphis, Spot became a fixture, regularly crossing paths with Jerry Lawler in a long-running rivalry that helped define the territory's identity. Those bouts were intense, physical, and deeply embedded in the local fan base, making it all the more painful that Spot's life ended at an event meant to honor Lawler. By that stage, Spot's health had been declining for years. He lived with diabetes, and the accumulated damage from decades in the ring had left his body severely vulnerable. The warning signs existed, but like so many veterans of his generation, he kept working in spite of them. His death pushed uncomfortable questions to the forefront. How much responsibility do promoters bear when they book aging performers? At what point does nostalgia cross into negligence? And how frequently does the industry dismiss obvious warning signs until someone pays with their life? Moondog Spot may not have been the most recognizable name in wrestling history, but his story stands as one of the most transparent examples of how the business has repeatedly failed the very people who gave it everything they had. And that brings us to the conclusion of this list. In many of these cases, it wasn't a single move or one isolated moment inside the ring that caused these tragedies, but rather the accumulation of long-standing health conditions, relentless physical strain, and years of punishment absorbed by the body. These were risks accepted during an era when wrestler health was routinely overlooked. Consequences proved irreversible. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Wrestling Rivals so you don't miss the next ones.